Starfleet Academy, Cadet Kirk, Chapter 7. Heavy laser bolts slashed through the bushes, burning the leaves and raising a terrible stink. Insects clouded upward. Sizzling branches crackled through the shaken trees and hit the ground inches from McCoy's huddling body. He had run, but he had stumbled. Spock and Cadet Kirk were somewhere in the bushes too, but he couldn't see them. His heart pounded in his chest. Why would these people kidnap them, then try to fry them with lasers? Without raising his head more than a few inches, he shimmied under the bushes, through the dry moss and decaying vegetation. Lasers again. McCoy kept his head down. Bark and stones sprayed across his spine. "This way!" He looked up in the direction of the cadet's voice, then crawled toward the sound. As the lasers pounded the earth again, only 10 feet away, two sets of hands grasped him and pulled him under cover of a fallen log. He found himself curled between the cadet and Ensign Spock. "How'd they find us so fast?" he asked. Spock squinted at their attackers. "The Mayday signal. I was concerned about exactly this." Cadet Kirk glanced at him, frustrated that following regulations had gotten them into deeper trouble. "Why are they shooting at us?" McCoy wondered. "If they want hostages, why are they trying to kill us?" "They're not," the cadet said bluntly. Digging an elbow into the moss, McCoy craned to look at him. "What do you mean, they're not?" "The laser bolts are hitting 10 feet in that direction and 10 feet in the other direction. They're firing at a column around us. They're trying to scare us, not kill us." "Then they do want hostages," Spock concluded. The cadet peered out at the two small craft, which were now circling for a landing. "They want Richard Daystrom." "Then we should contact them," the Vulcan said. "Tell them who we are. Once they discover that Dr. Daystrom is not among us, logically they will not pursue the actions they're taking. They won't want to risk a kidnapping charge for no profit. When they land, we'll identify ourselves." The two craft were already on the ground, still buzzing with power and glowing with their power-packed weapons. "Permission to speak, sir," Cadet Kirk said then. He looked as if a light had gone on in his head. "Yes," Spock responded. "Well, what if they don't think that? Or what if they don't care about kidnapping charges? What if they don't even care about a murder charge?" "That's true," McCoy agreed. "Just because we present them with logic doesn't mean they'll react like Vulcans." "What is the alternative?" Spock peered at them both, unable to think of any other way than simple, direct logic. Captain Kirk suggested, "We have to fight our way out." McCoy looked around. "Fight our way to where? Our shuttle is here. You mean get inside it and fight?" "It'll take time to clear the branches away," Spock said. "We have no time." Cadet Kirk looked out at the highlands to the west. "We can get away from them, then make our way into those hills and hide out until a rescue detail shows up. The distress call went out," he added, pinning Spock with a glance. "And all we have to do is hold our own until they come." "They might be coming into a trap because of us," Spock pointed out. "That's their job, sir," the cadet said unapologetically. "It'll be mine someday. Our job right now is to be alive and well when they get here. We can do that if we can get to those hills." "We have to try negotiating first," Spock said. Captain Kirk ducked under a branch to look at him. "I respectfully remind you, sir, that regulations specifically say that no Starfleet personnel should negotiate with terrorists." "There's a time and place for everything," McCoy said warily, watching the nearby craft. "We're unarmed, aren't we?" "We might be able to fake something," Cadet Kirk said. "I'll see what's aboard." He dodged back behind the log as 6 kidnappers appeared outside their small crafts. "Humans," McCoy said automatically. "Oops, there's one Klingon among them. Look at that. I've only seen 2 Klingons in my whole life, and there's another one. I've never seen any at all." Cadet Kirk mentioned, peering through the leaves at the dangerous-looking men coming toward them carrying handheld weapons. They don't move freely in Federation space, do they? No, Spock said sharply. The cadet smirked briefly, then scooted away behind them into the trees and bushes. Usually they keep to themselves, McCoy added. Unless they want to cause trouble, that is. He turned to Spock. You and I are scientists. I'd feel better if I were trying to argue a point with a dish of bacteria. He's not a scientist. He nodded in the direction Cadet Kirk had gone. Maybe he's got a better instinct about this kind of thing. Certainly better than you, right? After all, Vulcans and instinct don't get along, do they? Clearly irritated, Spock squinted through the bushes. Not lately. What do you want to do? The cadet is well-intentioned, but hot-headed. I prefer to contact these men, find out their terms. The 6 men moved in their general direction, aiming their laser rifles, clearly looking for target. They seemed ready to shoot, and a shiver went down McCoy's spine as he anticipated the graze of hot energy crossing his body. One of those lasers could cut a person right in half, or slice off a leg and seal the wound in one swipe. I'll speak to them, Spock said. You stay down. No argument here, McCoy muttered. Spock arranged his feet under him, preparing to stand up and face the men. McCoy ducked, and so did Spock. What had happened? Had the men shot at them? Had the lasers cut into the trees overhead? Cadet Kirk crouched halfway up the trunk of the tree, holding on with one hand and holding a laser torch in the other hand. He was cutting a branch with a silly little laser torch. Suddenly the huge branch shuddered, snapped at the base, thundered through the other branches, and came down on the heads of 2 of the kidnappers, driving them to the ground. Starfleet Academy, Cadet Kirk, Chapter 8. Cadet, belay that action. Spock raised his voice enough for the cadet to hear, and McCoy is pretty sure the approaching kidnappers clearly heard him too. They would know now that the attack was broken off on purpose. Maybe that would even work in Spock's favor if he intended to try talking to these rough-looking people. The cadet lowered his laser torch and looked at Spock from the protection of the tree's trunk. Spock motioned him to stay where he was, but the cadet was already halfway back to them. The young man skittered through the bushes and crouched near McCoy. Sir, he asked the Vulcan, I thought we were going to defend ourselves. I have decided to attempt negotiation, Spock said. You mean we're giving up, just like that? I have no intention of surrendering, Cadet. In fact, I will not order the 2 of you to associate with these people, but as a Vulcan, I have an obligation to attempt to negotiate, to find a common ground. They will be forced to make a new plan when they discover Dr. Daystrom is not here. We may be able to come to some compromise. Cadet Kirk didn't like what he was hearing. His mouth worked with things he was about to say, but which he held back. Finally, he pressed his lips tight and kept quiet. Just in case they aren't impressed with Vulcan philosophy, McCoy asked, what do we do then? Escape, the Vulcan said without inflection. Follow the cadet's original plan. Hide in the hills. Wait for rescue. Spock raised both hands high and turned toward the kidnappers. He counted off a few seconds, during which just his raised hands showed over the bushes. Then very slowly, making sure they could see him clearly, he stood up. Come on out here. All the way out. Hands up, one of the kidnappers called. You Starfleet? Another asked. The Klingon swatted his comrade across the chest. Of course, Starfleet, you idiot. What else is that uniform? Cadet Kirk hunched toward McCoy. Together they watched as Spock made his way through the bushes to the open ground, then walked evenly toward the kidnappers. You think he knows what he's doing? The cadet asked. I think he thinks so. He's got a couple 1,000 years of Vulcan philosophy backing him up. What if those men haven't read Vulcan philosophy? Compromise usually means that somebody loses. And it's not usually the guys with the guns. They watched for a few moments while Spock was questioned by two of the men in the Klingon, while the other man stood back and waited. The other two, whom Cadet Kirk had dropped the branch onto, were struggling to their feet and trying to collect their senses. McCoy tried to evaluate what he was seeing. Was a Klingon in charge out there, or the big red-haired man with the mustache? Perhaps it was a small-boned, bald man with the space between his teeth. They were all talking to Spock one by one. The only men not talking to him were the two who'd been injured, and the one other, a tall, skinny fellow with black haircut, very short, and sticking straight up from his head like a currying brush. Ensign Spock's not telling them much, Cadet Kirk said suddenly. He's trying to get information out of them without giving them any. How can you tell? Because they're still asking him questions. If they'd found out what they wanted to know, they wouldn't be asking so much. Every time one of them asks something, Spock gives a long answer. He's making stuff up. Trying to pay attention, McCoy watched the way the men were speaking to Spock and decided that the cadet might be right. Spock was doing a lot of talking, but McCoy guessed he wasn't saying very much of any value. That's the leader over there, the cadet said suddenly. Which? The Klingon? No, the black-haired one. One over to the side? But he's not saying anything. He's just watching. I know, the cadet confirmed. He's watching, and the others are glancing at him every time they ask a question. Listen, if we have to run for the hills, I want you to go first. Over their shoulders, McCoy could see the hills, but had doubts about running to them without being cut down by those laser rifles. If I go first, he asked, what will you be doing? His laser torch doesn't have much range, but it's enough to set fire to these bushes. I'll make a firewall to cover our escape. I don't want to have to worry about you while I do it. Oh, you won't have to worry about this country boy, believe me. I've got long, long legs. They get longer when there's a rifle pointed at my back. Don't blame you. The cadet paused. You know what? I don't even know your name. Oh, it's Leonard. Hi. Hi. The cadet chuckled. I'm Jimmy. James T. Kirk. I know. I read the ID on... Look, the black-haired one's moving in. Shh. McCoy motioned him silent as they watched. Looked like the cadet was right. As the thin man with the short black hair came closer, the others moved back, even the Klingon. The sight alone, a Klingon backing off from a human, was scary. What kind of man was this? The skinny man fixed his eyes on Ensign Spock. He was a little taller than Spock and was able to tuck his chin just a bit as he moved closer. He stared without blinking, like a cat stalking a bird, and Spock was certainly like a bird, like a raven, a smart dark raven. He stood there elegantly, a slim pillar of Starfleet control. The bright sunlight flickered on his ink-black hair. Suddenly, the skinny man lashed out with the butt of his laser rifle and cracked Spock across the side of his head. Spock managed to tip his head away at the last second, easing the blow somewhat, but it was still a hard knock. Spock went sprawling on the crisp dirt and rocks. That's it, Cadet Kirk said. Spock just told them that Dr. Daystrom isn't with us. Now the head guy is mad. The skinny man shouted a single order. McCoy didn't pick up the word as it echoed against the back hills. And the Klingon and the red-haired man moved in on Spock. They dragged him to his feet and shackled his arms behind him. Then with the butt of a laser rifle crammed into the back, they shoved him away toward one of their little craft. They're taking him prisoner, McCoy gasped. Come on, Cadet Kirk grabbed his arm and pulled. Let's get out of here.